To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
So my dear children, in the earlier chapter we discussed about several things regarding the sustainable development and how to use these environmental resources eco-friendly, or how to manage these resources contained within our environment. So here within this topic, my dear children, or within this chapter, we'll be discussing a fresh new topic. Here also we are discussing certain things related to the same lesson part, the sustainable development and the environmental management. So now within here, within this chapter, my dear children, we'll be discussing about mainly how to minimize the carbon footprint and food mile. Okay, how to minimize the carbon footprint and food mile. Okay, so carbon footprint. So I think I have already given you what kind of a thing is this carbon footprint is. Okay, so carbon footprint, I think I have given you a brief introduction for the carbon footprint within our previous chapters. Carbon footprint is my dear children. Now this is the amount of carbon dioxide which is getting released by a certain individual or certain institute within a certain time period. In simple, this is what do you mean by the carbon footprint. Okay, so here it is given the carbon footprint. The amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere as a result of activities of a particular individual, organization or a community is a carbon footprint. Total carbon footprint cannot be calculated as carbon dioxide is naturally produced, whereas it needs more data. So carbon footprint, my dear children. So here it is given. The amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere as a result of activities of a particular individual, organization or community is a carbon footprint. So here a carbon footprint means, my dear children, in simple, this is the amount of carbon dioxide which is getting expelled to the environment, right? Amount of carbon dioxide which is getting expelled to the environment by a certain individual or a person, right? But there are certain complications in here because we won't be able to calculate the carbon footprint accurately, because you know that naturally there is a process of releasing carbon dioxide. You know that naturally a person is going to respire and release carbon dioxide. So we won't be able to calculate, right, carbon footprint of a certain person or a certain within a certain individual accurately, because some data is somewhat lesser in here. So we won't be able to get necessary amount of data in order to completely calculate the carbon footprint. However, my dear children, carbon footprint is very important. This is a very important factor. Why is that? Because, my dear children, when you take the carbon footprint, higher the carbon footprint of a certain individual. Now let's take, when you take a certain institution, mechanical institution or a certain factory, my dear children. Now within a certain factory, we have the ability to measure the amount of carbon dioxide which is getting released only from the factory premises, not from the not by the people who is going to live on there. But when you take a certain factory, right, we can measure the amount of carbon dioxide which is getting released by that certain factory within a certain time period, my dear children. Okay, so by that way we can get a certain idea about it. So here the special thing is that, my dear children, now higher the carbon footprint, higher the emission of carbon dioxide gas to the environment. So if high amount of carbon dioxide gas is getting released to the environment, that means, my dear children, the environment pollution, the sustainability is going to disappear. right? Environment pollution is going to be high and the sustainability is going to disappear from that premises for sure. So therefore, it's very important to minimize the emission of carbon dioxide, or else to minimize the carbon footprint in a certain industry, or else in a certain warehouse or any kind of a place. Okay, especially these things are applied within industrial zones, my dear children. So there are different ways in minimizing carbon footprint within these industrial zones, my dear children. We'll be discussing about those things when you go further with the lesson part. However, it's important, it's very important in our houses as well to minimize the amount of carbon dioxide which is going to emit for the environment. So we can follow different ways to minimize the carbon footprint. Now within our house, right, we can minimize our carbon footprint. Like how? If we can minimize the burning of different plant and animal materials, then we can minimize the emission of carbon dioxide to the environment. If we can minimize the waste substances which is getting collected within the environment, my dear children, then also we can minimize the carbon footprint, right? Especially by the burning of firewood, by the burning of different plant and animal materials in our household activities, my dear children, more often we release carbon dioxide. So if we can minimize this thing up to a certain extent, then we can minimize the carbon footprint. So minimization of carbon footprint is very important for the sustainable development of the environment, and also it is healthier for the people as well. Why it is going to be healthier for the people who is living in the environment? There is no certain relationship now. Actually, there is, my dear children. Now, like I said, the amount of carbon dioxide which is getting released to the environment is the one which is referred as the carbon footprint. Now, it can be by a certain individual or by a certain person or by a certain machine or else any kind of industrial premises. Now, when increasing the amount of carbon dioxide released from that particular person or for any other place, what will happen? These carbon dioxide get accumulated in the environment, and because of that accumulation, now if large amount of carbon dioxide is getting expelled to the environment, large amount of carbon dioxide is getting collected within our atmosphere. That means, my dear children, the global warming is going to increase. Now you know that what will happen when increasing the global warming process, right? So conditions, different conditions, different catastrophic events will going to happen to our environment, and because of that, people who are living within the environment are also getting danger, right? Getting into a danger. Okay, so it's very important to minimize the carbon footprint of a certain individual or in a certain premises, right? So that we can control, or else we can minimize the effects, okay, minimize the bad effects given out by the emission of carbon dioxide gas to the environment. Especially, you know that carbon dioxide gas is a greenhouse gas. Okay, that is why it's important to minimize the carbon. It is very important to minimize the carbon footprint. Okay, so I hope that you got the idea about the carbon footprint, my dear children. So here this other specialty is that we won't be able to calculate 100% accurately, right? We won't be able to calculate this carbon footprint 100% accurately, because naturally also carbon dioxide is getting released to the environment. Okay, right there. Next one given, my dear children, the water footprint. So we discussed about the carbon footprint. Now it's time to discuss about the next one, the water footprint. So here it is given: the amount of fresh water utilized in the production or supply of goods and services by a particular person or group. So this is the amount of fresh water utilized in the production or supply of goods and services used by a particular person or a group. So here, my dear children, we are going to focus about the amount of water which has been utilized in making a certain product or in providing a certain service to the people. Okay, now I'm also providing a certain service for the people or for you guys know. So now here I'm also doing some kind of a service. So for this service, the amount of water which I am going to use, right? And for all the equipments and all the people around here, okay, the fresh water that they utilize is the one which is simply called as the water footprint. Now for a service, it's pretty much difficult to calculate this kind of a thing, right? For a service, okay. However, my dear children, if you take, right, for a service it's difficult, but however, if you take a certain product, for a product, my dear children, like up to a certain accuracy, we can calculate the amount of water footprint, okay, up to a certain accuracy, not 100%, but up to a certain accuracy, we can calculate the water footprint without any trouble. So here now you are given with several examples of water footprints. So to produce 1 kilo, now all of these things are given according to a unit mass, my dear children. That means per 1 kilogram, okay? So per unit mass, that means for about 1 kilogram of chocolate, 24,000 liters of fresh water is needed. So water footprint of 1 kilogram of chocolate is 24,000 liters, my dear children. See how much large is it? So that means, my dear children, to create or to produce 1 kilogram of chocolate, 24,000 liters of water is required. Okay, 24,000 liters of water is required to prepare just 1 kilogram of chocolate. Then next one, beef 1 kilogram. Okay, beef meat 1 kilogram. To prepare beef meat 1 kilogram, 15,500 liters of water is needed. 15,500 liters of water. So because you know that beef, in order to prepare beef 1 kilogram, flesh should be developed, tissues should be developed. When developing tissues and flesh, my dear children, special tissues and these meat items, when they are developing, large amount of water is being utilized by this particular animal. So therefore, my dear children, to create like 1 kilogram of this flesh, actually 15,500 liters of water is required. Fresh water is utilized by this particular animal. Okay, so the water footprint of 1 kilogram of beef is like 15,500 liters. The next one given, eggs 1 kilogram, somewhat lesser than that, right? So here 4,400 liters. So to produce like 1 kilogram of eggs, 4,400 liters have been utilized. Okay, this is the rough or somewhat near value, my dear children, not 100% accurate value. This is somewhat near value. Okay, nearly it's about 4,400 liters for a 1 kilogram of eggs. The next one given, sugar 1 kilogram. Sugar 1 kilogram, 1,500 liters for preparing 1 kilogram of sugar. Fresh water is being utilized. Right, see how much of volume has been utilized. 1,500 liters of fresh water has been utilized when creating 1 kilogram of sugar. Then next one given, coffee 1 kilogram, 140 liters. For the production of coffee, 1 kilogram of coffee, 140 liters of water has been utilized. Remember, all of these water or all these volumes of water are reflecting about fresh water that can be utilized, my dear children. Okay, fresh water. So you know that within our planet Earth, there is about 0.01% of fresh water that can be utilized. Okay, there is plenty of water within our planet Earth, my dear children, but however, there is only about 0.01% which can be consumed. All the other waters There are several sources, but however, all the other sources are will not be able to consume by us. We won't be able to consume these things. Okay, it's because, my dear children, now when you take these sources, most of the water contained within our planet Earth is available as marine water, right? So you know that different kinds of salts and other kinds of minerals are dissolved within this water. So therefore, for much purposes, we won't be able to use it. Okay, especially for consumption, we won't be able to use it. Okay, then the other forms of water is available as glaciers in the solid state. So though that water also cannot be utilized. Okay, so therefore, my dear children, there is only about 0.01 amount of water which can be utilized in different places. Okay, so therefore, my dear children, the quite important fact is, if you take the water footprint, higher the water footprint, that means if a certain food item or else a service is going to take too much of water footprint, that means, my dear children, that food item is not sustainable, or else that food item is not environment friendly. It is not that much environment friendly. That means large amount of water is getting used by that particular product. Okay, so therefore it is important to minimize the usage of these food items. Okay, because, my dear children, higher the water footprint, you know that higher the environment pollution, right? Higher the water footprint, higher the environment pollution. That means indirectly it is going to affect the environment pollution. Not directly, but indirectly it's going to affect for sure, right? So therefore it's very important, my dear children, it's very important to reduce the water footprint as much as possible when we are making service, when we are making products, or else when we are providing services for the people, right? So this is about the water footprint then, right? So after the water footprint, my dear children, you are given with the third main topic, the food mile. The distance over which a food item is transported during the journey from producer to consumer is known as food mile. So the distance over which a food item is transported during the journey from producer to consumer is known as food mile. So food mile means, my dear children, this is also a certain concept. I have already introduced you this thing within our previous chapters, my dear children, but in brief, not in a greater extent. Right now we are going to study about the food mile in somewhat a explained manner. Okay, so here the definition of the food mile is given at first. So food mile is, right, food mile is the distance by which a food item is going to travel from the producer to the consumer. In simple, distance by which a food item has traveled from the field towards the plate of the consumer. Okay, the entire distance traveled by the food item from the field to the plate. So this is what do you mean by the food mile, right? Actually, now in the when you go for the American standards, now American standards, they measure the distance by using miles. Okay, by using miles. Usually in our international standard models, we use kilometers to measure the distance, but however in American standard, they use miles. So that is why it is given as food mile in here, right? So miles is somewhat greater than kilometers. Some amount is greater than, like when you take 1 mile, it is equal to 1 point some kind of 1 point something in kilometers. Okay, that means there are greater than 1 kilometer, right? There are more than 1 kilometers in a 1 mile. Okay, so food mile means, my dear children, distance by which a certain, right, distance by which a certain food item traveled from the producer to the consumer. Okay, right. The food mile changes according to the quantity of food and the place it is produced. So according to the place which the food item has been produced, and also according to the quantity of the food item contained, the food mile is going to change. Okay, so food mile is going to depend on two different factors. First one is the quantity of food, and the next one is the place which has been produced. Okay, so example given here: food mile of some of the foods that you take for your breakfast can be calculated as follows. Suppose you are in Kurunegala. So as an example here it is given. Now we are going to calculate the food mile, right, for the that was taken during our breakfast, right, during that. Now let's imagine we had these items for our breakfast. So if so, what are the, right, or what is the summation of food mile, right? So here we are going to assume that we are living in Kurunegala area. So for the breakfast, my dear children, here it is given the first one, rice. Rice, it has traveled only 1 mile. That means it is taken from your paddy field. Now let's imagine that we have a paddy field near our Kurunegala area. So from that paddy field we can get food. That means rice. So therefore the distance which the rice has traveled is equal to like around 1 mile. Okay. Next one, potato curry. So with rice there was potato curry. Potato curry has traveled like 100 miles because it was taken from Velimada area. Now in Velimada area there is plenty of potato, my dear children. So potato is grown heavily in Velimada area. So from Velimada area we need to get this potato. Now you know that from Velimada food is getting here the food item is potato. No, potatoes are getting transported to Kurunegala and each and every other places in our country. Okay, so as it is taken from Velimada area, the distance traveled by this potato curry from the producer to the consumer is like 100 miles. Okay, 100 miles. Then next one, coconut. There is no distance which the coconut has traveled because it is taken from your garden, right? So from your coconut tree, from your garden. So therefore there is no distance to travel. Okay, then the next one, eggs. So coconut 0 miles. Then eggs 10 miles. That means taken from a poultry farm of your area. So within our area, if we are going to receive from a poultry farm, so the distance which the egg has traveled is around like 10 miles. So altogether within this meal, within the breakfast meal, we can calculate the food mile as here 100, here 101, then plus 10, altogether 111 miles. So these food items, my dear children, the breakfast of ours has traveled like 111 miles when it is coming to us. Okay, when it is coming to us, it has traveled around 111 miles. Okay, so this is what do you mean by the food mile then? Okay, the distance by which each food item in our meals traveled from producer to the consumer. This is what do you mean by the food mile. Okay, food mile. So here we have done a calculation by taking an example that we are living in Kurunegala area, and also as our breakfast we took these food items: rice, potato curry, coconut and eggs. Okay, so we got the answer as 111 miles. This is the food mile of our breakfast then, right? Okay, so another example given, my dear children. So here now we need to calculate this thing. So you are given with certain details. String hoppers made 85 miles rice taken from Polonnaruwa. Okay, so string hoppers which are made, now these string hoppers has traveled like 85 miles because here we took the rice from Polonnaruwa. Okay, so as we took the rice from Polonnaruwa area, this string hoppers has traveled around 85 miles. The next one, dal curry. Okay, dal curry 925 miles. The thing is, now this dal came from Mysore area of India. Okay, it has obtained from Mysore area of India. You know that usually dal is getting imported to Sri Lanka from India, right? So from Mysore area of India, dal has imported. So as it is taken from India, the distance which the dal has traveled is around 925 miles. Okay, next one, coconuts. As coconut is taken from your garden, there is no distance which the coconut is going to travel, so 0 miles. Next one, coconut sambal, 185 miles taken from Jaffna. So coconut sambal is now obtained from Jaffna. So therefore, this has traveled like 185 miles. The next one given, coconuts once again. So as it is obtained from your home garden, there is no distance. Right, now let's go for the summation. So here you need to add 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15, 5, then 9, here 10, 11, 11 plus 8, 19, 9, then 10 plus 1, 11. So miles. Let's see our answer, whether our answer is correct or not. So here 5, here 5, here 5, 15, 5, 1 is left over. Then 10, 18 plus 1, 19, 9, 1 is left over. Then here 10, that one 11. So altogether for this meal, my dear children, food has traveled like 1195 miles. 1195 miles. This is the food items that has traveled, right, within this meal, my dear children. So what are the meals contained? String hoppers, right, made from the rice taken from Polonnaruwa. Then dal curry. Dal was made by using the dal which is imported from India in Mysore region. So coconuts obtained from home garden. Then coconut sambal obtained from the Jaffna region. So altogether the summation is equal to 1195 miles. Then the next one, bread. This is another example. Okay, the third example. So for the third meal, bread, fish curry, coconut sambal is there. Okay, so bread has traveled 9340 miles. Why? Because it is obtained from wheat flour from America. Okay, from America, from the wheat flour obtained from America, right? Bread has been prepared. So therefore, it has traveled like 9340 miles. The next one, fish curry, 44 miles. It is taken from Nigambo region. So therefore, only 44 miles. Next one, coconut sambal. Coconut sambal has traveled like 800 miles because this was taken from Chennai, India. So altogether, now let's see the summation. Here 4, then here 8, right? Here 4, then here 8, then my dear children, here 3 plus 8, 11, 1, then 1 for the other side, 10. Let's check whether this thing is correct or not once more. We'll add over here 9340, 44, then 800. So here 4, here 8, here 11, 1 is going to the other side, and here 10. Here's 10,184. So it is our answer is correct. So here the final meal has traveled like 10,184 miles when it is coming from producer to the consumer. It has traveled 10,184 miles. Okay. Now, by doing these calculations, my dear children, what is the idea that you can obtain? What kind of an idea that you can take from these food miles? Let's go for the previous one once again. Over here, it's like 111 miles. So, 111 miles is the first for the summation for the first example. Then for the second one, it is around 1,195 miles. Then for the third one, 10,184 miles. Okay. So, our three values were, once again, the previous one, 111, then 1,195, and finally 10,184. The three values, let's take that these three are, right, the three meals that we consume during one day. Breakfast, then lunch, then this is the dinner. So my dear children, 111 miles. If you take 111 miles, my dear children, now this is like somewhat around 115 to 120 kilometers. So the meal which we consume during the breakfast has traveled around 115 to 120 kilometers, or else 111 miles, my dear children. That means in order to travel this kind of a distance, like 120 to 115 kilometers, these food items are going to use certain amount of fuel. And these food items also going to consume some certain amount of, okay, this food item is also going to consume some certain amount of energy, human energy for sure. Otherwise the food itself is not going to come, no, right? Then the other thing is that, my dear children, when during the transportation of these food items, my dear children, they use different kinds of machinery and different other kinds of resources. So therefore, in order to travel a certain distance, some amount of energy, some amount of fuel, some amount of other kinds of resources are going to be used by a particular substance or particular food item during the transportation. What will happen if the food item is traveling somewhat longer distance then? Like in here, the second example, for the lunch now it has traveled around 1,195, no? So that means, my dear children, in here, a greater distance has traveled. So greater the food mile means you can get an idea that greater the fuel which is going to consume, greater the resources and the energy sources which is going to consume by that food item. Because in order to travel a lesser distance, if lesser amount of resources are being used, to travel a greater distance, greater amount of resources should be utilized, right? Otherwise, it won't be able to travel that much of a distance, no? So therefore, my dear children, it's very much clear to us that now if you take the third example, it is even more. Now it has traveled like 10,184 kilometers or miles, right? 10,184 miles. So that means, my dear children, these food items has traveled like a huge distance, 10,000 more than 10,000 kilometers, right? So that means, my dear children, the energy and the energy resources, and my dear children, the amount of fuel which used by this particular food meal is very high. So when we increase in these things gradually, it's very clear to us that the sustainable development is definitely going to reduce. Higher the food mile, higher the emission of carbon dioxide, higher the food mile, higher the usage of natural resources, higher the food mile, higher the water footprint, higher the carbon footprint. So therefore, my dear children, if the food mile is going to increase, then it is not sustainable. And also, environment is not getting managed as well. So it's very important to minimize the food mile as much as possible. Which means what? How we can minimize the food mile? Simple, my dear children. Consume as much as national food items, or else food items which are grown within the country itself. By that way, you can minimize the food mile for sure, because if it is grown and utilized within our country, that means, my dear children, the distance which the food item is going to travel is going to be very less. If you can plant your own food items within your home garden, then it is 100% efficient and sustainable, because the food mile is minimized and it becomes zero. So therefore, right, minimization of food mile can be done within our homes by ourselves. If you can minimize the food mile, my dear children, definitely you can minimize the environment pollution, because different factors, different factors, environmental favorable factors can be optimized by minimizing the food mile. Like the carbon footprint, you can minimize the carbon footprint, so the emission of carbon dioxide is getting reduced. Water footprint, we can minimize the water footprint by minimizing the food mile, my dear children. So by that way, we can save water which is remained within the environment. So lesser the food mile, what will happen? Higher the sustainable development and environmental management. Okay, right then. So here it is given. So the summation is given, my dear children. Once more, 1,195 miles. Then here 10,184 miles. Right. So as long as the food mile is short, sustainability and the environmental friendliness is high. So like I said, my dear children, right, by the summation you can clearly get the idea. Okay, so once again it is given, higher the food mile, lower the environment friendliness, and also sustainable development is also less. Okay, but if you can reduce the food mile, or else if the food mile is short, then my dear children, sustainable development and the environmental friendliness is very high. So therefore, we should take actions to shorten the magnitude of the food mile. So it is very important to take actions to minimize the food mile. So what are the actions that you can take? Like I said, as much as possible, try to consume local foods, okay, and try to grow crops and other kinds of vegetables and other kinds of food items in your home garden. That's the best thing to do, to minimize, in order to minimize the food mile. Okay, right then. So this is about the food mile, carbon footprint, and the water footprint, my dear children. So it's very important to minimize all of these three in order to, right, in order to in order to manage our environment, and also in order to keep our environment clean and healthy. Okay, it's very important to keep our environment healthy and clean. Otherwise, my dear children, there can be different circumstances. Okay, but these circumstances are going to be very tough and also disastrous. So therefore, it's very important to minimize these things, right? Minimize these three factors, especially water footprint, food mile, and carbon footprint, in order to manage our environment and for our sustainable development. Right then. So given our next topic, so we have discussed about the food mile and the water footprint and the carbon footprint. So with that one, a part is now finished, my dear children. Now we are going for the next main topic under the sustainable development and environment management. So this is the waste management. Waste management. Let's see what are the things given under the waste management then. Consumption of substances becomes greater with the increase of human population. Even though natural waste materials deteriorate gradually, they get collected to the environment rapidly. Now, here it is given, consumption of substances become greater with the increase of human population. Now, you know that our human population is in the exponential phase. That means there is a rapid growth within the population. So that means, my dear children, day by day the human population is keep getting increased. Because of the increasement of human population, okay, because of the increasement of human population day by day, what will happen? The waste materials which are getting accumulated on the environment also getting increased, because we use different substances daily, and when increasing the population, more number of people use different substances daily. So therefore, the waste materials which is getting accumulated within the environment also going to increase from day to another day, right? So this is mainly happening because of the increase of human population. Okay, so here it is given once more, even though natural waste materials deteriorate gradually, they get collected to environment rapidly. So you know that some waste substances are there in our environment gradually with the time, okay, they're going to deteriorate. But however, with the deterioration rate, my dear children, right, if more and more particles or if more and more waste materials are added to the environment before the deterioration of previous ones, then what will happen? The bioaccumulation, or else accumulation of biological particles, or else other different kinds of waste materials is going to increase. That means the previous ones will not have the ability to decompose naturally, because the time taken for that purpose is taking somewhat longer. Okay, while it is getting deteriorated, some other substances are getting added to the environment right now. Some waste materials, other waste materials are going to add to the environment right now. For a certain example, let's take like this. Let's imagine that a certain A4 sheet is going to take like 1 week to decompose. Okay, so within 1 day, I'm going to dispose one A4 sheet, one discarded A4 sheet. Then on the next day also, I'm going to discard once again. Then on the next week, I'm going to discard hundreds of them. That means, my dear children, within 1 week, only one A4 sheet is going to decompose. But however, I have released like hundreds of them. So the particles are getting accumulated within the environment, right? These materials, these parts are getting, or these waste items are getting accumulated within the environment. 99 of them are remained within the environment. Only one is getting decomposed. The one which has disposed earlier at the beginning. So in the same way, the same process is happening for each and every waste substance which we are going to remove to the environment. So with the population, people are using more and more substances. So therefore, creation of waste materials has also got increased day by day. Okay. And because of the usage of these waste materials, my dear children, right, because of the usage of different materials, waste materials which are getting accumulated in the environment, that is also keep getting increased from day to next day. Okay, so odor of such waste spread in urban areas rather than villages. Non-deteriorative materials such as polythene, plastic, electrical cells, electronic waste, electric bulbs, and printed colored newspapers get collected in the environment continuously. When burning these waste materials, gases such as dioxin emits. So, my dear children, especially in urban areas, now when you take an urban area like a city, there is too much population. There's too many people. So these people, for sure, they are going to release different kinds of waste materials to the environment. So especially this condition can be observed within urban areas. So within urban areas, my dear children, accumulation of waste substances is going to be very high, right? High waste substances are getting accumulated within the environment, within these cities, urban areas, right, at a greater or at a very higher rate. So that means, my dear children, urban areas are the ones which are facing this collection of waste at a greater or else a higher rate, my dear children. Okay, so rather than in villages, non-deteriorative materials such as polythene, plastic, electrical cells, electronic waste, electric bulbs, and printed and colored newspapers get collected in the environment continuously. So in urban areas, my dear children, we can observe different kinds of waste. Like what? Like polythene, plastic, electrical equipments, then electronic waste, electric cells, then, my dear children, electrical bulbs, then printed and colored materials, right, printed and colored newspaper like materials. All of these things are getting collected within the urban cities, especially because of high population, right? When burning these waste materials, gases such as dioxin emits. Now it's important to dispose these things. So when disposing, most of the times what people do is they're going to burn these things. As they are combustible, these things are burned by the people. But however, when burning these things, my dear children, what will happen? Toxic gases like dioxin will emit. So in that case, what will happen? In that case, my dear children, severe environmental conditions may occur, right? So the collection of waste materials within the environment is also a not good thing, right? It is not going to be, right? It is not going to be environment friendly, and the sustainable development is getting disappeared over there, right? So the environmental management is not going to be a factor within a certain environment or within a certain city. So therefore, my dear children, it's very important to minimize the disposal of waste materials into the environment, right? So here it is given, when these waste materials are buried, soil gets polluted and heavy metals get collected into the soil. Now the next issue. Now, when burning, toxic gases emit to the environment. If we dispose these things to the environment, just dispose, or else if we bury these things within the soil, then what will happen? Then, my dear children, you know that if you take like electronic waste, these things contain heavy metals. So these heavy metals will now come and collect with the soil, and sometimes it will go till the groundwater and will get collected to the groundwater. So in that case, severe health conditions will occur for the people who is living in that particular area. And also, my dear children, it is not good, it is not healthy for the organisms who are living in that area as well, for the people and for the other organisms as well. And also, because of heavy metals, soil will get infertile and the soil will get poisonous, right? So like that, there are heavy disadvantages when these waste materials are getting buried within the soil. Okay, then next one, public is unaware of the danger of them. It is very important to be knowledgeable that gradual disposal of the tiny piece of plastic, battery of a mobile phone, CFL bulb be catastrophic. It is our responsibility to collect waste matter separately and forward it to the process of recycling. Now, my dear children, the other case. See, public is unaware of the danger of them. Now, people are releasing these materials to the environment without any acknowledgement, because they don't know, like, when releasing these things, what kind of bad effects will happen to them. They're just thinking about themselves to be clean, right? They're just thinking about their households, right, and to keep their households clean, but they don't think about their surroundings. So they just discard those things to the environment. Then what will happen? Their house will be kept in clean, but however the surrounding is not. So keeping the surrounding clean, keeping our environment clean is also very important, because we receive each and every resource from our environment. Starting from drop of water, we receive these things from the environment. So it's very important to keep the environment, right? Keep the environment clean. So people are unaware of that. The other thing is that, my dear children, it is very important to be knowledgeable that gradual disposal of tiny pieces of plastic, right? Very tiny pieces of plastic, the gradual disposal of very tiny pieces of plastic, then battery of mobile phones, CFL bulbs will be catastrophic. Why is that? Because, my dear children, these plastic fibers or these plastic microfibers, these things are getting collected with here and there within the bodies of organisms. Okay, so when these bodies of organisms are being consumed, especially fish, right, when these fish are being consumed by the people, what will happen? The biomagnification process is going to happen. I think you know about biomagnification, right? So transferring these toxic substances, or else transfer of these tiny particles from one link in a food chain to another. Then upon traveling, my dear children, they magnify, right? They magnify means the magnitude or the value or the quantity contained is going to increase. So therefore, because of the biomagnification, health problems will occur within the people, right? So not only these microplastic fiber particles, right, but other particles like heavy metals, then, my dear children, different other kinds of waste substances, all of these things are getting bioaccumulated. So it's not safe to release these things to the environment, even in smaller quantities. Okay, then what is the best thing to do? How we can manage these waste? The best thing to do is, my dear children, given here. It is our responsibility to collect waste matter separately and forward it to the process of recycling. So what we have to do is, we should never dispose these things to the environment. What we have to do is, as much as possible, we have to recycle these things. We have to recycle these substances. Now, recycling means, my dear children, We are crushing these things into smaller particles and we are rebuilding any other different kind of a material. For a certain example, we can recycle polythene and we can make new polythene ones by the older ones, by using older ones. For bottles, we can crush bottles into smaller particles. Then by using those smaller particles, new bottles can be made, my dear children. Okay. So we can use old paper, right? And we can, we can make them into a tiny powder. We can make them into a pulp, or else into a tiny powder and then into a pulp. Then this, by using this paper pulp, once again we can make paper. So this is what do you mean by recycling, right? This is what do you mean by recycling. Then in electronic waste also, my dear children, when you take CFL bulbs, that bulb area can be once again reused. It can be once again reused, right? Because within the CFL bulb, that circuit part is the one which is going to break down, no? Okay. However, the other parts are, it's just a material, no? So those materials can be used. Even though the circuit part is not working, the material part can be used, no? So if we can't recycle these things, then we can reuse these things for sure. When you take polythene, now you know that we receive polythene bags. If you go for the market, we receive plenty of polythene bags. So it's important to not to throw away these polythene bags. It's important to keep these polythene bags in your home, and when you go secondly to the market, you can carry one polythene bag with you. So you can refuse the new polythene bags from the vendor, right? So by that way, my dear children, you can minimize the use of polythene, right? So we can recycle, we can reuse, or else we can reduce even, right? So like that way, there are different things which we can do to manage our waste. So waste management is very important for our sustainable development, right then. So the waste handling technique named 4R is practiced in waste management. So like I said, my dear children, now I have introduced 3 R's over there. Can you remember? Reuse, recycle, and the third one is reduce. So actually there are 4 R's in handling the waste properly or sustainably, right? We can use this 4R concept. Now let's head on to see what is this 4R concept. So number 1 given, reuse. So already you know what do you mean by reuse, right? So reuse means in here, use as many items as possible again and again. Use as many items as possible again and again. That means, my dear children, reuse means, like I said, for polythene, you know that polythene can be taken, then we can keep it in our house. Then when we are going to the market, once again we can carry out that polythene bag. Then when we are buying new goods, we can ask the vendor to place the new goods into our polythene bag, not to a new one. So by that way, we can reuse polythene again and again, right? So when using polythene bags again and again, my dear children, the necessity for the new polythene bags are getting reduced gradually. By that way, the accumulation can be minimized. Okay, so the reuse. Next one given, reduce. Unnecessary items should be avoided or minimized. Avoid taking antibiotics and vitamins unnecessarily. So, can you remember I told you about the antibiotics, right? Can you remember I told you about the antibiotics in our previous chapters? So I told you it's very important to not to use antibiotics by our own. It's very important to use these antibiotics according to a prescription, because there is a high risk of creating antibiotic resistant bacteria if you use antibiotics without any prescription, my dear children. So for each and every cases, right, we have to use antibiotics with a prescription, and we should definitely get the consultation of a doctor when using these antibiotics. So therefore, we have to reduce the usage of antibiotics, right? We have to try to not to use these antibiotics and other vitamins unnecessarily. Okay, this is not, reducing means, my dear children, it is not mentioning about not using at all. Reducing means up to a certain level we are going to decrease the usage of it. Decreasing the usage and not using at all are two different things. Here we are discussing about decreasing the usage but not the other. Okay, so it's very important to decrease the usage of antibiotics because it is environment friendly. Like I said, if you use or if people use antibacteria in a greater antibacterial medicines in a greater extent, then we are posing our future in a great threat. It's because that in our future what will happen, bacteria that has resistant to the antibiotics will get developed within the environment. So we are going to pose our future into a grave danger. Okay, so therefore it's very important to minimize the usage of antibiotics. You have to use these things only when necessary. Okay, right. Then the next one, replace. Use of eco-friendly substances instead of incompatible materials with nature. So use of eco-friendly substances instead of incompatible materials with nature. Example given, use of organic fertilizer instead of chemical fertilizer. So the next one, my dear children, replace, the replacing. So replace in the sense, you know that replacing means here we are going to use a certain substitute instead of the one which is using right now. Why do we need to use a substitute? Because it is very important to replace harmful substances by a suitable different substances, right? By a suitable different substance from our environment. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, my dear children, right? We won't be able to, right? We won't be able to carry out our, our day-to-day activities will not be able to carry out, and also the environment pollution will also going to be increased. So if there is a certain catastrophic substance which is available in our environment, definitely we have to replace it by a suitable environment friendly one. Better example is agrochemicals. Okay, agrochemicals. So agrochemicals are, somewhat hazardous to the environment. So what we have to do right now is, we have to minimize the usage of, right, agrochemicals, and by minimizing at a certain extent, we should get the ability, or we will get the ability to replace these agrochemicals with organic materials. However, like I said, my dear children, we won't be able to do it all of a sudden, right? We won't be able to do it all of a sudden, because you know that, like I said, we have learned that when you take our soil, now our soil has got used to the chemical fertilizers and chemical agrochemicals. So therefore, all of a sudden, if you are going to 100% eradicate these substances, then what will happen? Definitely the yield is going to be reduced, and there can be a scarcity of food as well. So we have to carry out this thing step by step. Step by step, we have to reduce the usage of agrochemicals. Then we have to use organic fertilizer. Now, when you take countries like Japan and Bhutan, right, more often they use very less amount of agrochemicals with large amount of organic fertilizer and other organic substances. However, they use in very small amounts, not in greater extent, but in very smaller amounts. Their plan is to, right, minimize and replace these agrochemicals 100% with organic fertilizer and organic substances. However, they are not doing that thing all of a sudden, right? What they do is they gradually reduce the usage of agrochemicals and giving out a certain chance to develop the fertility in our soil, right? In their soil, not ours, okay? In their soil, they are developing the fertility gradually. By that way, my dear children, we can successfully replace agrochemicals with organic fertilizer and organic substances. Okay, otherwise it is going to be a catastrophic one, right? So it's because that it's very important to, now you know that our soil has got now used to it. So if all of a sudden we are going to stop it, then it won't work. However, the gradual replacement will do the trick for sure. Okay, so this is the replacement. So if a certain item is unfit and if it is not environment friendly, then we have to replace it with a good substance. That is how this waste management would work. Okay, next one given, recycle, the final one. Process to convert different raw materials, animal dung and dead bodies into new products to prevent waste of potentially useful materials. So process of convert different raw materials, animal dung and dead bodies into new products to prevent waste of potentially useful materials. Example given, production of biogas using animal excretory matter, dung and dead matter. Recycling polythene and plastic in order to produce fuel. So, recycling, once again, process of converting different raw materials, animal dung and dead bodies into new products to prevent waste of potentially useful materials. So, each and every material in our environment is, my dear children, useful for us. We have to find out the use. That's the case. Each and every material is useful, but we have to find out the use. Okay. So, if we are discarding any other substance, okay, if you are mentioning that these substances are useless, then it is incorrect, because there is a certain use. We can use it. However, we have to find out the use. So sometimes there are some materials which can be reusable, but however, we have to change the shape or the order or the materials contained within it. So in that case, what we are going to do is, we are going to take that substance and convert into a different substance. By that way, we are making it use once again. This process is called as recycling. Okay. So you know that dead plant and animal bodies, as they are dead, they are no use. They have no use. However, dead plant and animal bodies can be utilized to make biogas, my dear children. Okay. So you know that dead plant and animal bodies are going to release methane gas. So methane is the main component contained within biogas. So we can create biogas by using these dead plant and animal bodies. And also waste food items, cow dung, animal waste materials, human fecal materials, all of these things are getting discarded from our environment. So all of these things can be used to generate biogas, my dear children. Okay, even though these things are discarded away from the environment as waste materials, there are some certain uses which we can carry out by these substances. So this process of reusing substances by converting those things into a different kind of a smaller or else some kind of a complex form is referred to as recycling. Okay, here by converting that particular substance into a newer substance, we are reusing it once again. Okay, So this recycle process can be carried out to different substances. Like I said, right? First and foremost example is you can use this waste food items, right? Waste organic materials, dead plant and animal bodies, cow dung, fecal materials of animals and humans, all of these things to generate biogas. Okay, because within biogas, methane is the main component. Methane is getting produced when decomposing those substances. Then the second example, recycling polythene and plastic in order to produce fuel. To produce fuel, my dear children, we can use this polythene, plastic and other kinds of substances which is getting expelled to the environment. Okay, so by using or by burning these things, we can generate certain fuels. And sometimes, my dear children, you know that polythene can be used to, okay, this polythene can be used to recycle and to create hard polythene fiber, right? So like that way, there are different kinds of users for each and every substance. So I think you could remember I told you previously about glass. So glass can be utilized once more. We can use this glass, we can powder it, and we can once again heat it to form new glass substances, new glassy containers, right? To make new glassy containers, we can use older glass. So I think you have heard that usually within these days, if you are staying at home, my dear children, I think you are familiar with some people who are coming for your houses to collect waste substances, right? Substances which are getting thrown away, like empty cans, then plastic items, then electronic items like washing machines, televisions. These people come and they collect these things, and in return you are given with money, or you are given with any other different kind of an object which you can use. Why do they do that? Why do they do it as a business? It's mainly because they are going to use these things and they're going to recycle. So we can recycle these things, my dear children, especially plastic, polythene, those kind of substances we can recycle once again. And when you take, cans, metallic cans like beer cans and other substances which is getting accumulated within our environment, right? So these cans contain aluminium, right? These beer cans and other soft drink cans, these cans, fizzy drink cans, these cans contain aluminium, my dear children. So we can use this aluminium in preparing different kinds of other metallic substances, right? So therefore, it's important to collect out these things and recycle as much as possible. So recycle will give us, right, an added advantage in reusing material in a different form. Okay, so these are the 4R concept which we can use to handle waste. If you follow 4R concept like this, my dear children, then it's not going to be, right, that much a difficult problem in managing waste. Okay, waste can be easily managed if you can follow up with the 4R concepts. Don't try to destroy waste all the time. Try to follow at least one of these processes. By that way, my dear children, you can manage the problem related to the waste matter accumulation. Okay, right then. So this is about the waste management that can be carried out in our environment. Right, my dear children. So this is the waste management. Remember, waste is the good thing, right? Waste is not a bad thing. If you manage the waste carefully by following these steps, then waste is a good resource for us. Okay, remember it, my dear children. So waste is not just like a ghost. It's not a bad thing. Only thing now, the thing is that we have to manage it properly. If you don't manage it, then it is going to be a terrible ghost. But however, if you manage the waste properly, by using at least one of these processors, then waste is going to be a friendly neighborhood one for you guys. Okay, so therefore it's important to manage waste, my dear children, and make waste as our friend. Okay, right. So within this chapter, my dear children, we have discussed mainly about the waste management system. Okay, how we can manage the waste so that the environment can be managed properly, and also how we can manage the waste for our sustainable development. Okay, so these are the main key factors which we have discussed within this lesson part, within this chapter. So in our next chapter, my dear children, we'll be focusing about the final topic related to the lesson part, which is under the energy management. So we'll be discussing about the energy management in our next chapter.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.